All right. We're going to go ahead and get started. Sorry that the light looks a little weird on the thing today, I think, but I had to mess with the lights because they were flickering in the room again. So we only have to be in this room 9 more times, not that I'm counting or anything like that. I don't even think that many. So thank you for braving the weather. I know it's kind of gross outside and everything. I'll try to make sure it's worth your while today. To get started, I want to kind of talk about what we're doing for the rest of the semester now that big portfolio is done. Yay! Right, yay! Now we just get to grade it. Yay! All right. So the homework assignments that are coming up, you have the jQuery assignment. That's the one where you are redoing the 5 challenges in jQuery instead of JavaScript. Normally homework is due on Sundays. I moved that back to a Tuesday, 2 weeks from today, because then that way I figured if anyone does come the week of Thanksgiving, where attendance is usually pretty low, we're happy to help out if you have some questions there. And then the last homework you're going to do, I don't have the write-up, but I did want to show you right now what it's going to be. And we're going to work, you'll learn how to do it next week. The final homework, programming homework, is going to be a weather app, where I give you the outline of the code again. If I hit get weather, it will default and get the weather from Ann Arbor. It's currently, sadly, it's in Fahrenheit. You would think it was in Celsius. The weather and a little picture, what the high will be and the low will be. I could also put in Paris, maybe in Celsius, and find out it's raining there, or someplace warm and beautiful. Probably not, but Rome in Fahrenheit. Wow, crappy weather everywhere. In other places, it's probably nighttime. So that's going to be your final homework assignment there. You're going to be using APIs to connect with the weather app. Yes?
That's a very specific question.
Yes?
Is there a certain API you want?
Yes, well, exactly which API to use. I made sure the API returns high and low, and it returns the image, the icon for you. All you're really doing right here is doing a lot of query selector, replace blank text with what the high is and what the low is. Yep, so just like the other ones, I will give you a template, and you will fill it in. Okay, if I can find it. When I originally give you the code, oddly, it will look like this. And part of your job will be like, oh, hey, hide this part by default, and then show it after we hit get weather. And when you run the API, it'll fill in. It is currently, it'll fill this in. The high will be, it'll fill those in. Okay? Yep, and I'll have the whole write-up before class next week when we start talking about APIs. Okay? So what we were going to do, I also noticed that the API quiz opened today, but since I haven't covered it, I just moved it all back another week. So if you got a glimpse of it beforehand, feel free to glimpse at it, but it's closed now. But I'll reopen it next week so you'll actually know what the heck it's talking about when you go there. Okay? So today we're just going to do a little bit of jQuery review. So please go into Canvas, and if you go into Canvas for today, you're going to find something called JS discussion jQuery.html. I did not do a great job of renaming this file, but it's something you've seen before. If you want to download this, it's going to be really helpful for you today. All right, the slides as well, because once again, I have some links to W3 Schools, but only one time. All right, so the readings for this week that I put up a really long time ago were all about accessibility. Okay. The reason I put in quotes is because I know no one read them. I actually clicked on the link, started looking at the access report. Yeah. The reason I want to go back and talk about accessibility for just a few minutes is you're starting to learn how to do cool things. All right. If you decide to be a web developer, you'll learn that, as all geeky people do, they've formed sides. And there's the people who think front-end programming, which is mostly HTML and CSS, that they're losers. And everything has to do with more things like Node.js and React and creating things from a more programming side. I, of course, being a Midwesterner, family of 5, fifth child, believe everyone's right, right? That's how I roll. And the thing is, because when you learn these basics of HTML and CSS and you know them pretty well, you can know what all these accessibility tools are seeing. You understand what semantic tags are and things like that. When you're just doing a lot of backend or kind of like the cool stuff, the programming stuff, it's easy to get kind of fixated on the cool and not as much on how people are using it. So if you go back and you were to do the readings, they were on 2 things. They were on a carousel, like photo carousel, and the other one was on making accessible navigation menus. And what I want to just kind of stress is when you start doing the cool things, you want to make sure you're making them accessible. So for instance, a carousel, which I can hit play on this, by the way. Carousels, when you have the images and you click usually on little arrows and forward and back and you kind of go through. Sometimes when you go to a carousel, especially on like news sites, the carousels start automatically, right? You just sit there and it just starts showing you all the pictures. You don't need to hit the buttons, which is actually less accessible, right? So one of the things when you start doing jQuery and JavaScript and you can start controlling things is realize that people should really have control over as much as possible. For some people, the carousel goes just much too quickly, right? At my son's school, for some reason, they put all the class information as a carousel, and there's no control, so I can never stop it. So if I'm trying to read it, and there's some really complicated slides, I try to take screenshots, like real quick as they go by, or things like that. So you want to let people control the speed. All the navigation, you all know this now, right? All navigation you should be able to do via a keyboard as well as a mouse. And then this idea of when things are in focus. So for a lot of people, particularly those with brain injuries or people who just have some other cognitive issues, if you give them a whole bunch of information, it's really hard to know where to go. So if you're going to make a carousel, you want to think of these things. And then again, also, I talked about this already, sometimes people need more time to read. It's like me, trying to read how my kid can get from one high school to the other. The other one that's I think is going to be a really big deal in the next 5 years is how more and more of us are going to voice-activated everything, right? If you don't have good semantic tags, and if you're not making things accessible, it's going to be much harder for people to use voice control to interact with your site. Okay? So if you want to look at this later, or should I say, if you want to look at it again later, the one I gave you was just, they gave you an actual working example. Oops, you're not seeing what I'm seeing. A second. If you click on that link. All right. There is a working example of a slideshow. You can either use the arrows, you can also use the numbers, you can also make it go, I can make it run or pause automatically. So if you decide that that's something you would like, the code is like super intimidating the first time you look at it, right? Because they started off right away with all these removing event listeners and adding event listeners. So that's why I kind of left it more as like hey, they even did regular expressions. There was a little bit of overkill here. That's why I didn't give you directly the link to the code. But it gave a decent example. The other example they talked about is that I put in the reading was menus. And I'm going to do example. A lot of people like drop-down menus. But if you notice, I don't particularly think it's intuitive that I need to click on edit to open and close the submenus. A lot of people, when they do submenus, they make it so you can't actually go up and down. When you're, does that actually work? No, okay. When you're working on future projects, make sure, again, that there's a lot of like hand testing. These are the type of things that Axe and Wave would never find for you, all right? When it comes down to it, when you do accessibility, there's a lot of hands-on, okay? All right. So let's go back here. And your jQuery and your JavaScript. I'm going to admit this slide is for both you and my grad students, but it's more for my grad students because you all have way more confidence in your programming skills than my grad students do. All right, you might not think so, but you do. All right, so we haven't really been talking about jQuery. Has anyone here done jQuery or JavaScript before this class? Okay, great. I'm excited about that because what I'm hoping is that between what we did, the little bit we did last week, where you were only half listening to me because you were thinking about your portfolio, and then plus the little bit we do this week, that you're going to realize like, oh, if I have to go out and do something like this on my internship, I want to practice what you're going to do, right? There are a lot of things that as teachers we do that you particularly hate, like with great passion. So for instance, this group project, I'm giving you no guidelines. People hate that. Oh, I know that. But when you go for your job interview, your job, future employers aren't going to say, tell me about an assignment where the teacher specified every part of it and you got to check off everything they told you to do exactly as they told you to do it. Nobody's going to care about that. They're going to say, what's the worst thing that ever happened to you? And you're going to say, I took a class with Colleen Van Lent and she gave us this assignment and there was no rubric, and so I had to decide either I was going to complain about it or I was going to pick the one thing I was interested in and go with it and not admit you did both things at the same time. That's kind of where we're going to go with is a lot of times there isn't going to be a lot of specification when you get in the real world. So today let's talk about what would happen if they asked you to do some jQuery and you didn't know where to get started. Okay? So we're going to redo an earlier JavaScript exercise. We're going to do the one where you started off and you had to change the H1 to your name and you had to count how many list items there were and all of those things. Remember that one? It is now posted in Canvas. It's the one oddly called JS Discussion jQuery. Okay? So you want to grab that. Okay? And while you do that, I'm going to go to the next slide. Is it jQuery? Yeah, whatever the file is in there. It was, my internet was going in and out last night, so I did the best I could. Okay. So first thing, when you leave class or even when you're in class, you need a go-to place that you Google when you need coding help. All right? There are certain things I can't do on a plane anymore, and one of those is coding because I like to have, we're always looking things up, right? Python in particular, I don't even bother. Like HTML, I can change things. So with JavaScript and jQuery, it's kind of the same thing. So you want your go-to. So if you have a specific question and you manage to find the words and you type them in, Stack Overflow is good. It's really good. There's a joke that they're considering renaming the computer science degree to How to Google Stack Overflow. Like, oh, I got a bachelor's in Stack Overflow. Oh, wow, okay. The important thing I like to remind people is that when you go to Stack Overflow, the first answer is rarely the best one. The first answer is the person who's like, I'm going to answer this first, without really thinking through it carefully. So Stack Overflow is nice when you have a very specific question. Like, they are asking me to do this. But a lot of times when you have this ambiguity, it's better to have a place where you're kind of like, all right, I want to look at a tutorial. I find most default documentation super boring and hideous. All right, my favorite places to go are the ones where anytime they tell you about something, they then have an editor or something where you can try it out. Either W3 Schools has their try it out button, but also, oh my gosh, hopefully I wrote it down because I'm forgetting. CSS, oh my, I'll remember it in a second. The other place, wherever I Google, it always shows up. It's a CSS something site. I'll Google as soon as we get on here. They tend to link to CodePen. All right, so now this is odd because I have the same slide twice. Okay, so let's go here for a second, or at least I will put this up here for a second. And I might have to go to where I have two screens now. So today we're going to do jQuery, right? I'm going to go in here. I'm going to go to this open hyperlink. I'm going to open it up for you. This is the page I would like you to reference today. All right, it's in the slides, and it's all about different HTML and CSS methods. So when we did the movie one, I sent you to a page in my tips and tricks, and hopefully you went because it had all the things like play and pause and I think it was volume, all the things that you kind of do. Same thing here. So I'm not expecting people to go and never memorize these, but this is a reference I'm going to kind of have us off to the side as we think about recreating that JS one. All right, so let's go back here, and I'm going to start right here. So hopefully you all have this. If you're just coming in, this is the, it's on Canvas, it's the jQuery one. So if I open it, it should look like this. All right, let's do this together as jQuery, and let's do it slowly. All right, so let's go ahead and using jQuery, try to change the very first thing was, let's put your name goes here. All right, so if you go to your editor, let me go back here, and Ian, if you want to help keep an eye out here as well. I'm going to go down here. All right, change the H1 element to your name. I'm going to try to do that first. How do we start with jQuery? Does anyone remember what we even do? Yes. Yes, yeah, okay. So I'm going to do, and we're trying to, oops, I'm somehow still in comments, so, oh, because I did this backwards. There we go. $. Need something in there, dot something. Okay, so actually I'm going to open this up real quick. When we did this in JavaScript, we did this. We did query selector, H1, inner HTML equals Colleen Van Lent. So that's how we did it in JavaScript. So if we're going to do it in jQuery, you were right, we start with the $sign. What do we need inside here? This is going to be our selector. What is it we were trying to change? Every time. So I'm going to put that. That would kind of go on this side. But let's go back here for a second. Let's have both of them at the same time if I can. What's the element I'm looking for? Yep. So, all right, so I'm actually just going to do this for a second. And this is how we did it before. Don't copy this yet. Oops. This is similar to how we would have done this in JavaScript. So I'm going to go in here real quick. I'm going to open in browser, inspect, console. All right. $sign is not defined. Does anyone remember what that meant? Or do you have a guess as to? So the $sign is correct. You were right. We want to use a $sign. Yes? Right. Yeah, it doesn't know what the $sign means because it doesn't know that we're trying to use jQuery. Great. So what we always have to remember, and I'll do it as if I was here with you. I would put in, so we have two options. We can either download like the jQuery file, or we can use the jQuery, what was called the CDN, right? And the CDN means you don't have to keep track all the time. So we could either download it and save it, or we can copy and paste it. So you're going to need to grab that just like I did. I'll put it here at the top so I would not try to read that and type it in. I would do that quick jQuery CDN and copy and paste it. Oops. Yes. Oops. 46. Oops. All right. Yes. Right, so that whole link right here, you can either, it needs to be its own script tags, and you can either put that in the head or in the body. Most people put it in the head, but I just want to keep everything down here so you can see it at the same time. So, can anyone run it and not get an error now about the, is everyone able to get rid of the $ error? If you're not, raise your hand and I'll make Ian start running around doing full duty here. Is anyone still typing it in? Okay, people are still typing it, great. For those of you who did get it to work and didn't get an error, you may have noticed that this did not work. All right? So go to the reference page that I linked to and see if you can figure out what method or attribute, that wasn't your computer, was it? I feel a little ill. All right. And see if you can figure that out. Okay. I'm still trying to get it. Check the credit card you used to buy it. And some of them have like 30 days protection. If you need to go solve them, we will also put that. We totally will. Yes. But check the credit card. That some of them have 30 days protection. Yeah. All right, so instead of .inner HTML, what does jQuery use? Yep, it just uses a method instead of setting an attribute. So what you'll discover is a lot of the methods in jQuery run double or triple duty. The .html method, if you don't give it anything, it'll actually return whatever the HTML is in. The .html, where you put something in it, that's the assignment. So this is kind of like an assignment statement. All right, and so I'm going to do this real quick. I'm going to say alert. Don't bother doing this. This is just for me to show you something. I get an alert that actually says your name goes here. If you use the .inner HTML method, it actually returns whatever the heck was in there before. But now when I hit OK, that same method was now used as an assignment statement. Okay? So the same method can be used to actually give you information or rename it. Okay. So based on that, I'm going to bring up the old answer again. The next thing we did is we updated the URL, the items, and the time. All right, so we did something very similar, and now I want you to do the same thing that you did before. Use the $sign, grab the element, and we're going to try to set the other side. Let me check the slides to see if I need to show you a new slide yet. Oh. Yes, so I will leave this slide kind of, actually, I think you've already seen how to use HTML, so I'm going to leave this up here. Let's actually do and say, okay, so based on this code, how can we change this so we're using jQuery instead? Okay. I'll give 3 minutes and then I'll start doing them for you. And you might need to Google things. Ian, can you get there? Thank you. So, quick note, for people who, jQuery is like JavaScript. It starts at the top and it works its way down. So if you have your JavaScript at the very top, it's not going to work because the H1 hasn't been created yet, or all these elements haven't been created yet. So something you can do, I'm actually going to show my answer for a second. So one thing that you can, and / you might want to do, is put all your code inside this function. This function right here says, hey, don't run any of my code until the page is completely loaded. So I'm going to leave these, I'm actually going to do this to kind of consolidate stuff. I'm going to put that, even though it makes no sense to be in here. If yours isn't working because your code is on top, the easiest thing to do, to be honest, is to Google document.ready because there's a lot of parentheses and curly brackets there. But if not, you can add this code up here. So I'm going to go back and help here for a second.
It's the worst. It's like the worst one. I know. And it's not even anything serious. It's literally just like my technical.
Anyone want another minute or two? Or does anyone want me to do the first one with them because they're stuck? Do the first one? Okay, so I'm going to go back here to kind of where I have my ants. That was my old JavaScript one. All right, so I want to update those 3 span elements, right? And the they were URL, items, and list items. Let's do URL first. All right. I'm going to go right here. So this was my original code, and now I know because I'm using jQuery, I can get rid of all of this and replace it with a $, as long as I have that hashtag inside here. Remember, because it's like, hey, look for the URL. All right. What should I replace inner HTML with? HTML. All right. Oops, I need to get rid of that one. That one makes sense? It's way shorter than the JavaScript. Doesn't necessarily mean it is more intuitive to people, but what I used to have, I'm going to put it in here just as a comment, sorry. I know you're all trying to desperately type this in. Where I used to have this, I now replace all of this with a $. Okay. What was the next one I had to do? I'm going to do one more. All right, so I need to get all of the items, right? So I get rid of this. Wait. Sorry. I gotta get this. It's like, hey, please grab that thing. I need to grab all the list items. How do I grab all the list items in jQuery? I'm gonna stare at you 3. Any idea? Oh, yeah, we want to get rid of it though, right? We want to get rid of it. You could leave it. What could we replace document.query selector all with?
Replace all?
Actually, a $. Just a $. Like, hey. Now, I'm not quite done yet. Because what am I still using that I shouldn't be using? And I just got to remember to be honest, yeah. I'm going to come back to the code in a second. Let me just double check this, make sure I got it. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to leave that last one to you for a second. I'm going to put what it used to be. And if you don't have the first 2 working yet, raise your hand so Ian and I can come by and make sure that those first 2 are working for you. There are so many places for typos. We can help you find them.
See, I didn't have to do anything.
It's just like, I was like, pretty eager for that. This is tough.
Did anyone get date to work? Is there a jQuery thing for date, or do we just use the JavaScript thing? We just use the JavaScript thing, right? So, have you ever heard that expression? You know, give somebody a hammer and everything turns into a nail. You can still use JavaScript and jQuery together. So this last one ends up being $time. Once you get the hang of this, the hardest thing about jQuery is trying to figure out how many parentheses you need to close up the various things. Okay? There is actually a programming language called Lisp, which was my demise in graduate school. It's all parenthesis based. You know how like in Python it's all with like tabs and stuff like that? It's all parentheses. We renamed list lots of irritating single parentheses. So no matter what language you do, there's something annoying about it. Okay, so that's how we did inner HTML using jQuery. Let me go back to the slides. I don't have many slides, but they're all good for you today. All right. This slide you don't need for today. You need it for the challenges. All right. But so in the challenges we used .inner HTML a lot. We also used .value a lot. We used a lot of .value, and you can't just say .value anymore when you're using jQuery. Just like where every place we used to have inner HTML, we replaced it with the method HTML. Every place in your previous one where you used to be using value, you're going to be using the .val. So if you want to get to the value of something, you put in the selector .val. If you want to set the value of something, that's when you do, just like we've been doing with the HTML, inner HTML, we get the element, we say .val, and then the value you need is inside. Okay? So you'll use this slide for the homework. Okay, I put it in there, but I'm going to go here because this is what, how did I copy and paste so many things so many times? Sorry. This is the one we want right now. We want the CSS values. Okay? So how it works is instead of using .style, .display, .whatever, we use .css. So if I want to know what the background color is of something, we would do .css background color. If I wanted to set it, I would do .css property name. So let's do these exercises together real quick. And then we'll do it in here. Okay. Ooh, that was big. Okay. So we want to have a pink background color to all the paragraphs. Here's our selector. What is the method? If we want to change the style of something, what's the name of the method we need to change? When we want to change the text, we use .html. When we want to use the style, we use .css. Right? What property do we want to change? Background color. And what do we want to change it to? Pink. I'm going to go back here for a second. Just so you know, it's super annoying because in HTML we could get away with saying background. We didn't have to say background color. I don't know if any of you ever played with that. You don't get to do that with jQuery. You have to be very specific and make sure you have the right property. All right. How do we add a 5-pixel red dotted border to all the paragraphs? Hold a second. CSS border 5-pixel. All right, quick note. Who here thinks my mentions of accessibility are annoying? Doesn't apply to you. Who's super distracted by these banners that keep blinking whenever I go to the next page? This is like why reduce motion is amazing, right? You can turn off stuff like that. All right, and then, okay, so the difference here is the first time I was trying to set the background color. Now I'm trying to get the background color. I need to know what the background color is. So the difference is I still use CSS and I still use background color. But now instead of saying like comma pink or comma blue, instead of setting it, I'm just getting it. I think that was, okay. And if you wanted to, I could actually set a background color green, color white, font size 25, padding 15 pixels. You can set as many things as you want, but this is how you do it. Use the .css. All right, so based on that, I'm going to go back here for a second. I'm going to have show answer right here. Your job, if we go back, we want to change the background color and the margin for the entire page. So can you change the background color and the margin, given what I just gave you? Okay. Timer, 3 minutes, struggle, go. All right. Can you go in and change that so that we're not using JavaScript, we're just using jQuery? Oh, okay. So like, I felt like there was
This one? Customer services? Or is it just for the screen?
I think it's just for the screen. All right. Ah. That's still classroom support. Okay. I'll stop by. There's a room over there. Oops, jeez, that's not good. Someone's visa form. Not mine.
That's really not good.
Okay. All right. Questions? Anyone? Anyone get it to work yet? All right. People still working on it. So don't forget, in jQuery, it's background minus color, not the background color. It's a different word. Check the console real quick. Yeah, no. Okay, let me do this down here real quick. So quick note, I always forget to put things in quotes, super annoying. I write in background color and then I gotta put it in quotes. If you might remember in JavaScript, people tried to use background minus color in the JavaScript and it didn't work. Because in JavaScript, you're not putting things in quotes. And so it's looking at it as if it's a programming language and it's really reading it as background minus color. But when you put things in quotes, all of a sudden that minus really just means dash or hyphen. Okay, so everyone's good on that one? This last one is a little trickier because I added something to make it, I thought, more interesting. So what I would like, the next thing is that copy and paste. All right, or the copy. Every time you copy it, we said, go blue, go blue, go blue. So let's go ahead and do that together. All right, so what do we need to do if we want to use jQuery for a copy? All right, this one is not intuitive, so let's Google. I would put jQuery copy, and then either listeners or event listeners. All right, I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger. Clone doesn't sound quite right. How to detect copy, paste, and cut behavior. All right, so we're gonna do something new. I'm gonna make this big so you can all see it. All right, and what we're gonna be doing is, in jQuery, it's called binding. We are binding an event to something. Hopefully this is not depressing or anything. Okay, so what I would like to see you do is, you don't need to write all this code, but we want to bind the copy function. So I'm going to go over here and just give you my code for a second. Can't see it super well, so I'm going to do this for a second. What are we listening to? This is the first question. We are trying to listen to anytime I copy or paste one of these things, right? I want to make it, instead of just University of Michigan, let's do it so I am listening to every single university. All right, and no matter what happens, for right now, we're just going to want to say go blue every single time in console.log. All right, so how can I identify just these list items, not the list items that are up ahead too? There's a difference between the list items at the top and the list items at the bottom. Yep, so the bottom one is we want to listen to all the list items in an unordered list. So what I'd like to see you do is, if I can do this without giving away the total answer, well, all right, what's the selector for list items in an unordered list? I want you to say, hey, jQuery, $. Normally we've just been using like an ID or a tag, but we can do the more advanced selectors just like we could in CSS. And I just want you to put this right here for right now. That's it. And raise your hand if you're not getting something in the console.log. My keyboard is really little, thank you, by the way, and no problem with that. Quick question, look at the code I gave you today and look at those list items, and there's something new and different in there that you haven't seen before. Can anyone tell me what it is? If you look at the code, there should be something in your starter code down in the list items that you haven't seen before. Yeah, so it's something called a data attribute. And we're going to use these a ton next week, so not next week, in 2 weeks. I decided, hey, let's introduce them now. Data attributes are a way for you to have variables in your program. Like right now, we don't really have like variables within our HTML. We can grab anything that's like an ID or a selector. So data attributes, they always start with the word data, and then you can give it any word you want after that. I picked cheer because we're going to be like, go blue, go, all right? We want to have a different cheer for each university. So I'm just going to show you this. What we're going to do is I want to go to that paragraph, and I still want to append a paragraph underneath it. Every time we cheer, I want to have a new paragraph that says like, go blue, or go whatever. All right? So I'm just going to explain this code to you. The $ hashtag cheer, we're good on that one, right? Go on the page and find it. The dot append, that means we're going to add some new. Instead of just replacing the code, we're going to append code to it. If we had HTML there instead of append, it would overwrite. This time we're saying add something to it. You're good with the P tag. So, I was going to say the word this. The code that I am highlighting right here is the new stuff. All right. When I use the word this, in the particular situation of this, of the code that we have right here, what is this referring to? What kind of element must I be talking about if I'm using the word this? And it just applies to this little chunk of code right here. What does the this apply to? Because this is like self, right? Whatever I copied, yes, that's exactly right. So if I go back to this, I hate the word this so much. If I copy and paste the line right here, then the this is referring to this line right here. All right, so if I copy and paste this one, it knows about itself. So let's say University of Michigan's the easiest one. If I go down here, it's going to say, hey, I just copied a particular line. Please grab its cheer data attribute, which in this case is going to be the word blue. These are all my different universities. Kent State Golden Flashes, the Panthers, the Elkman, the Beach is my favorite, right? So go ahead and just put this code in and then start copying and paste. Just start copying different lines on the actual HTML. If you get done and you want to see something, replace the append with HTML and see what happens. Okay? No thinking here, just type. And we will help you debug it. So raise your hand if you have any problem on that one. Function. Oh, I know what the problem is. people get it to work? So this data attribute we're using, just to give you an idea of what we're going to use it for in like 2 weeks, something like that. Remember how you have all those pictures on a page right now in your portfolio? We're going to add data attributes to them, like, and label some of them like, well, like someone did pizza. Like they're going to label some of them like vegetarian, and some of them meat, and some of them special. And we're going to be able to write code so we can actually filter them and click on a button and be like, just show the specialty pizzas, just show the cheese pizzas. If people have like travel, they can have, filter it by different locations and things like that. Okay? You will not need to use this bind element, I believe, on the challenges at all. It's just going to be that value, the CSS, and adding the listeners. Okay. That was it. This should be enough. So you are more than welcome to either start working on the 5 challenges. You can head off. You can ask us questions, anything you want like that. So the 5 JavaScript challenge or jQuery challenges aren't due until 2 weeks from today. So you have plenty of time to do it. This week in discussion, you're going to work on your group projects. And Thursday, from now on, they're not that many, but this Thursday and next Thursday will both be used for group work. The idea is to keep the group work as much into the discussion and class time as possible along that lines, okay? Questions? Quick note for people looking for summer jobs. There's a program called NSF. I would recommend you Google something called REU. It's a research experience for undergrads. They pay for you to do research at places all around the country. If you're looking for a less stressful job, I did want to mention Camp Michigania is hiring. It's a summer family camp where they tend to hire mostly Michigan college students. The staff seems to love it because some of them are back for like their 9th year in a row. But they're doing interviews and things like that as well. But if you're looking for a technical job this summer, most internships are probably going to start, if they haven't started already, December and January are going to tend to be the deadlines. So just wanted to give a heads up that happens early. Okay? All right. Specific or class?
Specific.
Okay. All right, I'll be right back there.